Why did no one stop when the wreckage was right there, burning against the divider like a torch in the daylight? She was the only one. Captain Elena Ramirez gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles paled, her pulse hammering louder than the siren of silence that followed the crash. Nebraska back roads were supposed to be empty, peaceful, not scenes of fire and twisted chrome. Yet there it was, an overturned Harley, flames licking along the leaking fuel, the rider motionless beneath it. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. Years of training had drilled out hesitation. 39 years old, 2 decades in uniform. She didn't think, she acted. The door of her truck slammed behind her, boots hammering the asphalt as if she were back on deployment, running toward explosions instead of away. The man was pinned. Leather jacket fused into steel, the smell of gasoline thick in the air, each breath tasting like war again. She dropped to her knees, tugged at the strap that bound him, but it wouldn't budge. Smoke burned her eyes. She reached instinctively to her belt. The combat knife she carried everywhere, a habit she couldn't break since her last mission overseas, was in her hand, blade glinting. She cut fast, clean, no panic, just movement the strap gave. His arm came free. He groaned, a sound that told her he was still alive. She hooked her arms beneath his shoulders and pulled with everything her body still had left. Muscles screamed. Back spasmed. She ignored it. 20 feet, 30. The wreck erupted in a sudden blast of fire that roared behind her as she shielded him with her own body. When she finally laid him in the grass, the silence after the explosion felt heavier than the fire. His pulse was strong, breathing steady, though blood smeared his face. She brushed it back from his temple, instinctively searching for the humanity beyond the mess. His eyelids fluttered. And that was when she saw it, the patch, the winged skull, the unmistakable insignia, Hell's Angels. Her stomach clenched. Memories shifted. Not of Afghanistan, not of the women and children she'd carried from burning houses, but of headlines, violence, weapons, drugs. Her father's voice in memory, gruff and judgmental. Those men aren't soldiers, Elena. They're criminals pretending at brotherhood. But here he was, human, hurt, breathing because she'd pulled him clear. "Stay with me," she said, voice low, steady, the command tone she hadn't lost. The man blinked, his words a broken rasp through the haze. "You pulled me out." "Ambulance is coming," she replied, her voice clipped like after-action reports. She didn't add the thought sitting heavy in her chest. "I didn't know who you were when I chose to save you." He coughed, tried to sit, failed. "Hawk," he managed. "They call me Hawk." His hand, tattooed, scarred, lifted weakly. She hesitated, then grasped it. Firm, no judgment, just contact. "Ramirez," she said. No rank, no history, just her name. Sirens grew closer, slicing the quiet fields with urgency. The paramedics swarmed, cutting her out of the moment, peppering questions she answered mechanically. No, she wasn't family. No, she didn't know him, just passing by. But his eyes never left hers, and as they lifted him into the ambulance, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His voice, hoarse but commanding, "Stay by your phone." She frowned, but her instinct, the old one that once obeyed orders without hesitation, made her nod. And then he was gone, doors shut, sirens fatting, leaving her in the smell of burned rubber and gasoline, staring at the road that had just changed her life. Driving home, the adrenaline drained, leaving only the ache in her back and shoulders. She should have felt relief. Instead, the old hollowness returned, the one that came every time she replayed moments she couldn't undo. Her small house sat isolated on 2 acres, quiet. A flag hung from the porch, rippling in the evening wind. Inside, silence pressed against her ribs. Photos on the wall, her daughter at 8, grinning toothless in a soccer jersey. The daughter she'd raised mostly alone after deployments and after a marriage that couldn't survive them. She dropped her jacket by the door, its weight heavier tonight, poured coffee instead of wine, sat at the table that faced the door, a habit she couldn't unlearn. Her reflection in the darkened window startled her. The sharp lines around her eyes, the buzzed-short black hair streaked with silver. The face of someone who had been too many things: pilot, sniper, soldier, mother, widow. The phone rang, unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something in her, the same instinct that had made her run toward the flames, compelled her thumb to swipe. Ramirez. A silence, then it's Hawk, the guy you pulled from the wreck, his voice rough but alive. Her spine straightened. How did you get this number? A cough, a laugh. Let's just say I've got friends who find things. She hated how casually he said it. Hated the way danger felt like it was seeping into her kitchen along with his words. What do you want? To thank you properly, he said, serious now. You didn't just help me out, you saved my life. That matters. In my world, that means something. She almost said the line she used with everyone. Anyone would have done the same. But she stopped herself. Because she knew it wasn't true. Most would have stayed in their trucks, called 911, watched flames from a distance. Noon tomorrow, he continued. Iron Horse Diner, Route 16, meet me. Her grip on the phone tightened. I don't need thanks. It's not about what you need, Hawk said, voice firm. It's about respect, about honor. The word struck her chest with weight she didn't want to acknowledge. Honor. A word she had bled for, sacrificed for, built her entire life upon. Why me? She asked quietly. Because you didn't look at my patch when you pulled me out. You just acted. That's rare. She said nothing. Noon, Hawk repeated. Then the line went dead. Elena sat at the table long after, coffee cold, staring at the silent phone. Her daughter's picture on the wall watched her. The quiet pressed in again. She whispered to herself like a vow, like a curse. I didn't save you for this. But something deeper, buried under years of service and loss, stirred anyway. Tomorrow noon, Iron Horse Diner. And she already knew she would go. Why had she agreed to meet him? That question pounded through Elena's mind as her truck rumbled down Route 16 the next morning. The road stretched out, straight and empty, fields of brittle corn and weather-beaten barns passing like ghosts. The diner came into view, a chrome-trimmed relic of the 70s, parked between a hardware store and a gas station. Its neon sign buzzed faintly in the sunlight. She pulled into the far corner of the lot, scanning instinctively. 3 motorcycles gleamed near the entrance, engines silent, chrome flashing like warning signals. Their riders weren't visible yet, but she felt them, watching, measuring. Her hand brushed the leather strap of her shoulder bag. Not a weapon inside. She didn't carry on civilian streets unless law required, but her instinct still wanted the weight of steel in her palm. She took a breath, steadying herself, and stepped out of the truck. Inside, the diner smelled of fried onions and coffee gone stale. Conversations hushed the moment she entered, eyes lifting from plates and mugs to study her. Some curious, some suspicious. She walked forward anyway, back straight, shoulders squared, like she was walking into a briefing room, not a roadside diner. And there he was. Hawk sat in a corner booth. His head was bandaged, his jacket stretched tight across his broad shoulders. The patch gleamed dark against leather, the winged death's head. Beside him sat 2 men, both in cuts, both wearing the same insignia, one broad and muscular with a calm alertness in his eyes, the other wiry, quiet, posture coiled like wire. Hawk smiled when he saw her, a scar cut fresh across his temple, but his gaze was clear. Captain Ramirez, he said, voice carrying through the room, glad you came. She stopped at the table. Her eyes flicked to the 2 men, reading them without words. The broad one had military posture, the kind you never quite lose. The wiry one was all suspicion and quiet threat. Hawk noticed her assessment and smirked. Diesel, Hawk said, gesturing to the bigger man, and Cutter. Diesel gave a small nod, respect in his eyes. Cutter said nothing. Elena slid into the booth, her back to the wall where she could see the entrance. Habit, reflex. The waitress poured her coffee without asking. The silence stretched until Hawk leaned forward, voice lower now. "You saved my life. In our world, that means something." She kept her tone level. "I didn't do it for thanks." "Good," Hawk said, lips curving faintly. "Because thanks isn't enough. You're part of the circle now, whether you like it or not." Diesel leaned in, voice gravelly. "Means we look out for you, and whether you want it or not, you're in." Elena studied them, her hands wrapped around the coffee mug. The heat steadied her. "Part of what circle?" she asked. Hawk exchanged a glance with Diesel before answering. "Circle of trust, circle of honor. You step up for one of us, we step up for you. That's how it works." She shook her head slowly. "I didn't pull you out of that fire for favors." "Doesn't matter," Hawk replied simply. "The debt exists." Her eyes narrowed. "Debt." Diesel chuckled softly. "Not money, not favors, something bigger." She stared at them for a long moment. Their words rattled her more than she wanted to admit, because behind the leather, behind the patches, she recognized something she hadn't seen in years. Brotherhood, the unspoken code of soldiers. "You were military," she said suddenly, fixing Hawk with a sharp gaze. A shadow crossed his expression. He didn't flinch. "Two tour, Iraq Marines." The words hit her like a jolt. She hadn't expected it, though maybe she should have. His posture, his awareness, the way he'd clung to honor like a lifeline, it all made sense now. "You?" Hawk asked. She said nothing at first. The memories pressed too close, but silence wasn't armor anymore, not here. "Air Force," she said finally. "Special tactics, recon, sniper support." Hawk's smile flickered softer now. "Knew it, the way you moved yesterday, the way you didn't freeze." Diesel leaned forward, curiosity in his voice. "What ops?" Elena sipped her coffee before answering. "The kind that don't show up in history books." It silenced them, but not out of intimidation, out of recognition. They knew. Cutter spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, despite his hard exterior. "Scorpions forced him off the road. Black SUV, tinted windows, they've tried before." Hawk's jaw tightened. "They want territory, they want to push us out." Elena frowned. "And you handle that how? Report it." A dry laugh escaped Hawk. "We handle our own." The implication sat heavy in the booth. She thought of her daughter, of the quiet house, the empty chair where her husband once sat before deployments and illness stole him. She thought of all the years she'd given to honor, and the way the world twisted it after. She met Hawk's gaze steady. "Why call me into this?" "Because you pulled me out," Hawk said. "That makes you part of it whether you realize it or not, and because—" he hesitated, the first flicker of vulnerability she'd seen. "Because you remind me of my uncle, Phantom, Force Recon, Desert Storm." Her breath caught. The name hit her like a buried mine. Phantom. She'd never met him, but she'd heard stories, quiet legends passed through circles. A man who could vanish in sandstorms. A scout who saved squads without firing a shot. "He's the reason I enlisted," Hawk said softly. "He didn't come back." Elena's voice was quieter now. "A lot of good ones didn't." Hawk nodded. "I carry him with me every day." Silence pressed the booth. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, real. Finally Hawk reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, slid it across the table. His handwriting scrawled on the back, "One call anytime." "You saved me," Hawk said simply. "Now I owe you, that's how it works." Elena looked at the card, then at him. She wanted to say no, wanted to walk out, throw the card in the trash, never come back. But the truth lodged in her chest. She knew she would keep it. Because something in Hawk's eyes told her that this wasn't finished. And she hated how much of her believed him. Why did her daughter always seem to call at the worst times? Elena's phone buzzed against the kitchen table that night, its vibration rattling the empty coffee cup beside it. She hesitated before answering, staring at the number flashing across the screen. Her daughter Sofia. 16 now, old enough to sense things her mother never said aloud. "Mom," Sofia's voice carried both relief and sharpness. "Why didn't you answer earlier?" Elena closed her eyes, leaning back in the chair. "I was busy." "Busy or avoiding me?" Sofia shot back, quick as always. The words cut deeper than Elena expected. She rubbed her forehead, pressing against the knot of tension that had grown there since the diner. "Not avoiding, Mija, just a lot on my plate." "You sound tired," Sofia said after a pause. "More than usual." Elena smiled faintly at the understatement. "Comes with the years." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, layered with things neither of them knew how to voice. Since her father's death, conversations often bent under the weight of what they didn't say. "Mom," Sofia said quietly, "sometimes I feel like you're still out there, like you never really came home." The words pierced, because they were true. Elena hadn't fully come home, not to Sofia, not to herself. Even after retirement, she'd lived with her back to the wall, her mind wired to threats no one else saw. "I'm here," Elena said firmly, more for herself than her daughter. "I promise I'm here." But the line between promise and truth blurred in her own ears. After the call ended, she sat in the silence again. The card hawk had given her resting like a challenge on the table. One call any time. The words felt dangerous and comforting all at once. She hated that. The next morning brought no peace. She woke before dawn, body refusing to sleep past the old rhythms of deployment. Strong coffee steadied her but couldn't quiet the tension winding through her chest. She stepped onto the porch, the Nebraska horizon stretching endless before her. And there it was, a black SUV crawling past on the road, windows tinted, engine low. It slowed near her property, lingered, then rolled on. Her heart thudded with the cold recognition of a pattern she knew all too well: surveillance. By noon she was at the hardware store. Jack Thompson, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, an old Marine buddy from town, raised his brows as soon as she walked in. "Morning, Ramirez. Thought you were finishing that cedar chest this week." She gave a half-smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Got sidetracked." He studied her, his gaze sharp with the same instinct that never dulled in men who'd lived by discipline and danger. "What kind of sidetrack?" She told him, not all of it, just enough: the wreck hawk, the diner, the SUV that now seemed to haunt her road. Jack's jaw tightened. "Hell's Angels," he muttered. "Ran into them enough when I wore a badge. They play by their own justice." "They're not just bikers," Elena said quietly. "They're veterans, some of them." "Veterans don't erase records," Jack countered. "And gratitude from men like that, it can be as dangerous as their hate." She leaned on the counter, her voice steady. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Jack reached below, set a small box on the counter. "Ammunition, hollow points. Then figure it out prepared." She stared at the box, then at him. "I don't carry any more." "You might need to," Jack said. His voice wasn't dramatic, just certain. That night the SUV passed again. Twice. Once slow. Once faster, headlights cutting across her walls as she sat with a glass of bourbon she didn't taste. Sleep came late, restless. And when it did, she dreamed of fire and sand, of men's faces she couldn't save, of the same pulse beating under her fingers. Hawk, soldiers, strangers, all merging. The next day she drove into town for groceries. Ordinary errands, trying to force life back into its old rhythm. She just loaded bags into her truck when a commotion at the entrance of Wheeler's Market caught her eye. Two men, thick, aggressive, towering over Martha Jenkins, the frail cashier who'd given kids candy for years. Elena's body moved before thought, again. "Martha," she called, voice steady, even as her steps quickened. Martha's eyes flicked to her, wide with relief. "Elena, they think I scratched their car, but I didn't." The taller man turned, sizing her up. His eyes lingered on the lines of strength that hadn't left her frame, despite her age. "Not your business, lady." She set her grocery bags in the bed of her truck, slow, deliberate. "She's my friend. That makes it my business." The second man stepped closer, sneering. You got any idea who you're talking to? His jacket shifted just enough to reveal the edge of ink, the scorpion tattoo curling along his neck. Her pulse slowed. Danger always brought clarity. "Why don't we all take a breath?" Elena said, voice calm but iron under it. "No need for a scene." The taller man glanced around, noticing the shoppers gathering. His bravado wavered. "Whatever, just keep her away from people's cars." But the second man wasn't ready to let it go. He shoved Elena hard, testing her. She didn't stumble, didn't flinch. She simply absorbed it, eyes fixed cold on his. That look, the quiet, unshaken assessment of someone who'd stared down worse, froze him. His sneer faltered. "Come on," the taller man muttered, pulling him back. "Not worth it." They retreated to a black SUV. The same one. Elena memorized the plate without meaning to, her mind still wired like a field operative. Martha's hand touched her arm, trembling. "Thank you, those men." "They won't bother you again," Elena said, though she wasn't sure if it was a promise or a prayer. But she knew one thing with certainty. The circle was closing. Why did the diner feel safer than her own home? That thought hit Elena hard as she stepped through the doors again 2 days later. The smell of frying bacon and burnt coffee should have been ordinary, but now it carried something else, familiarity. The kind you felt on deployment, when danger pressed in, and yet the outpost mess tent became the only place where laughter could live. Hawk was already there, seated in the same booth, his head bandaged but his posture steady. Diesel sat beside him, eating slowly, watchful eyes scanning the room. Cutter leaned back against the wall, restless, his gaze flicking to the windows every few seconds. When Hawk spotted her, he gestured with 2 fingers. "Thought you might not show." She slid into the booth, back to the wall again. "Thought about it." Diesel chuckled. "That's closer than most civilians get." "I'm not most civilians," Elena said quietly, and it silenced them for a beat. Hawk leaned in. "Scorpions don't let things go. That SUV you saw, that's them, testing you, seeing what kind of skin you've got." Her jaw clenched. "They already tested me once." Cutter smirked faintly. "And you didn't blink, that's why they'll push harder." Elena sipped her coffee, letting the burn in her throat remind her she was awake here present. "So what's your plan?" Hawk's eyes softened like he wasn't sure how much to reveal. Then he said, "We're riding out tonight, checking their ground. We've got word they're moving something through the old quarry. Could be weapons, could be worse." She felt the weight of the choice before he even asked it. "Come with us," Hawk said. "Not to fight, just to see, to understand what we're up against." Her breath caught. She wasn't in uniform anymore. She wasn't sworn in, trained for missions sanctioned by flags and governments. This was different, messier, lawless. And yet the part of her that had lived for operations, for clarity in chaos, stirred. "You want me there because of yesterday," she said. "I want you there," Hawk corrected, "because I've seen your eyes, you don't scare easy, and because I trust you more than half the men I ride with." The words landed heavier than she expected. Trust. She hadn't heard that word in years without flinching. Diesel's voice cut in. "If you ride knowing one thing, you're in it. No halfway." Cutter leaned closer, his tone edged with skepticism. "Or you stay out and keep pretending your porch light's enough to keep the wolves away." Elena studied them, their faces, their code, their fractures. She thought of Sofia, 16 and sharper than she wanted her to be, already suspecting her mother's shadowed life. She thought of Jack, sliding that box of ammunition across the counter. She thought of the SUV's headlights cutting across her living room walls. "Fine," she said, her voice level. "I'll come, but I make my own calls, no orders." Hawk's grin was small, but it carried weight. "Deal." Night fell heavy. The ride out to the quarry was a blur of engines and cold air cutting her skin. Leather and steel, headlights carving the dark. Elena rode with Diesel, her body moving with the bike as if she'd been doing it her whole life. The noise wasn't chaos, it was rhythm. At the quarry, silence swallowed the sound of engines as they killed the lights and coasted near the ridge. Below, floodlamps lit the skeletal outline of trucks. Men moved in shadows, loading crates into the back of a semi. Elena dropped low, eyes narrowing. The movements were too structured, too careful, not a gang's chaos, something else, something bigger. She whispered, "That's not just scorpions." Hawk's jaw tightened. "Exactly, that's cartel." The word cut the air like shrapnel. Cartel meant more than territory fights. It meant networks, smuggling, violence that bled into every town it touched. Daisel murmured, "So now you see." Elena's chest constricted. Not fear, recognition. The battlefield never really stayed overseas. It just shifted zip codes. A truck door slammed below, echoing across the quarry. The men froze in the shadows. Hawk's eyes met Elena's, sharp, measuring. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about all of us." For a moment, she wanted to tell him no. That she wouldn't be dragged into another war she hadn't asked for. That she had a daughter who needed her alive, not legendary. But her voice betrayed her heart. "Then you need to know what you're walking into," she said. "And you need to know what it costs." Her words hung in the night, heavy with the truth only someone who had survived real missions could deliver. The men looked at her differently after that, not as an outsider, not as a bystander, but as someone who had carried the same weight. And Elena knew, deep in her bones, that once again she'd stepped across a line that didn't let you come back the same. Why did danger always find its way home? Elena pulled into her driveway just after dawn, exhaustion burning her eyes from the long night at the quarry. She should have been relieved to see her little house standing untouched, its porch light still glowing faintly in the pale morning. But the moment she stepped onto the gravel, she felt it. Something was wrong. The curtain in the front window swayed. She moved fast, her boots silent on the steps. The door creaked as she pushed it open, every muscle taut. And there she was, Sofia, standing in the living room, her arms folded, eyes wide with the sharpness of a daughter who had waited up all night. "Where were you?" Sofia asked, her voice tight. "And don't say the store, don't say work, I know better." Elena froze, caught between the instinct to protect and the guilt of secrets she had no right to bury anymore. "I was out," Elena said softly, "handling something." Sofia's jaw tightened. "Handling what? You think I don't notice? The late nights, the way you check the windows every 10 minutes, the way you sleep with boots by your bed like you're gonna get called to deploy again. You're not in uniform anymore, Mom." The words stung because they weren't just observation, they were truth. Elena had been living as if war could walk through her door any second, and now maybe it could. "Come sit," Elena said, motioning to the couch, but Sofia shook her head. "You promised me," Sofia whispered. "After Dad died, you promised you'd be here, really here." The silence was unbearable. Elena wanted to tell her everything. About Hawk, about the scorpions, about the quarry and the cartel lurking behind them. But what right did she have to drag her daughter into a war she hadn't chosen? Instead, she said the only thing she could. "I'm trying, Mija. I swear I'm trying." The words sounded weaker than they felt. Before Elena could say more, headlights swept across the walls, slow, deliberate. Both of them turned to the window, the black SUV. Again. Sofia's hand gripped her mother's arm. "Who are they?" Elena's pulse hammered. She wanted to lie to soothe, but there was no disguising the truth anymore. "People I need to keep away from us." Sofia's voice broke. "You can't protect me from everything." The SUV lingered, then rolled on. Elena's chest ached with the unspoken truth that sooner or later the danger would test her front door. That evening she drove to the diner again. Hawk and his men were waiting, tension written on their faces. "They're watching me," Elena said, not bothering with greetings. "They'll do more than that," Hawk answered grimly. "Scorpions don't forgive embarrassment. You stepping in at that market, they'll come harder." Diesel leaned forward, elbows on the table. And they'll use family if they can. That's their way. Elena's fists clenched. They even look at my daughter and… Hawk cut her off. Which is why you need us. Alone, you can't keep her safe forever, but with us there's a circle, and once you're in, they don't get through. The idea of leaning on anyone twisted something inside her. She'd spent years being the protector, the one called when others faltered. Asking for help was foreign, dangerous. But Sofia's eyes, wide and afraid in the morning light, haunted her now. What about the quarry? Elena asked, shifting the subject. That wasn't just scorpions, that was Cartel. Why? Diesel answered, voice low. Cartel needs local muscle to move product. Scorpions sell them ground, get paid in blood and powder. Cutter smirked. And they don't like that Hawk's crew still owns this stretch of road. Elena's voice was sharp. Then why not call the feds? Hawk's gaze hardened. Because by the time feds move, people are already dead, and they don't care about names on gravestones out here. We do. His conviction struck her. Not because it was noble, it was survival. It was the same code she'd lived by in deserts and mountains. We protect our own. She leaned back, silence pressing the booth. She thought of Sofia again, of promises made and already breaking. She thought of the SUV circling her house like a predator. Finally, she met Hawk's eyes. If I stand with you, it's not for your patch, it's not for your war, it's for my daughter, for my home. Hawk nodded once slow. That's enough, that's more than enough. The words carried weight she didn't want. A vow she hadn't spoken aloud, but one she felt settle into her bones. Because Elena Ramirez knew now, this fight wasn't one she could walk away from. And somewhere in her gut, she also knew the cost would come sooner than she was ready for. Why did silence feel louder than gunfire? The quarry replayed in Elena's mind as she sat in her truck outside Sofia's school. Kids spilled out the doors, laughing, backpacks swinging, their voices carrying innocence she couldn't remember ever having. She scanned the parking lot like she was back on Overwatch, eyes darting to every car, every shadow. Sofia emerged, earbuds in, moving with the distracted rhythm of a teenager who believed she was invisible. Elena watched her daughter for a beat, pride swelling alongside fear, because Sofia didn't know. Not about the quarry, not about the cartel, not about how close the wolves really were. Elena stepped out, waving. Sofia spotted her, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Picking me up since when? Since today, Elena said softly, holding the truck door open. Sofia climbed in, arms crossed, the air thick with unspoken words. As they drove, Sofia finally asked, "Is it them? The men in the black SUV?" Elena's grip on the wheel tightened. "You saw." "I'm not blind," Sofia snapped. "Then quieter, are we safe?" The question hit harder than any shove, any firefight, because the truth clawed at Elena's throat. "I'll keep you safe," she said firmly, but the promise trembled inside her chest. That night the circle widened. Hawk called. His voice was rougher, tension cutting through. "They're moving sooner than we thought. Cartel trucks headed toward town. Scorpions riding escort. We can't sit on it." Elena's breath caught. "And you want me there?" "I don't want you," Hawk said. "I need you." The words lodged deep. For years, her identity had been built on being needed in impossible moments, and here it was again. She stood in her kitchen, staring at the photo of Sofia on the fridge. The face of a girl who deserved a mother who chose her, not missions. But outside that window, the headlights of the SUV glinted again, parked too long, too close. Elena whispered to herself, "If I don't stand, this comes to her doorstep." At midnight she rode again. Diesel at the lead, Hawk close behind, Cutter scanning every mirror. The engines roared down the highway, slicing the night open. They intercepted at a stretch of road outside the quarry, two trucks, black SUVs trailing. Men with rifles leaned out, the cartel's presence undeniable. Hawk signaled, the riders fanning out, headlights cutting arcs through the dark. Elena's heart steadied. her pulse finding the same cold rhythm it always did in combat. She dropped behind cover as bullets cracked the air. The sound was a storm, thunder, and steel. Diesel fired back, his shotgun booming. Cutter moved with lethal precision, every shot placed like a surgeon. Hawk barked orders, calm in chaos. And Elena, she breathed once steady, the same way she had on rooftops overseas. She lifted Diesel's spare rifle, sighted through the scope, and saw clearly, not just targets, not just enemies, men caught in a machine bigger than them. But machines kill, and hesitation kills faster. She squeezed the trigger. One SUV's engine block erupted. Sparks, fire, shouts. The firefight raged, seconds stretching like hours. Tires screeched, bullets pinged off chrome. When silence finally fell, smoke drifted across the road, trucks disabled, Cartel scattered. Hawk walked to her, breathing heavy but alive. His eyes met hers. "You didn't just ride with us, you kept us standing." Elena said nothing. Her hands trembled faintly, not from recoil, but from the realization of the line she'd crossed. Because she knew when she drove home, Sofia would look at her and somehow see the blood on her hands, even if none of it showed. And for the first time in years, Elena felt the old conflict rising again, the one that had haunted her every mission. When does protecting others become the thing that destroys the ones you love most? Why did her daughter's silence feel worse than any enemy threat? The morning after the firefight, Elena stood in her kitchen, staring at Sofia across the breakfast table. The girl barely touched her cereal, earbuds dangling from her neck, eyes downcast. Usually she'd argue, push back, demand. Today, nothing. "You didn't sleep," Elena said softly. Sofia's gaze snapped up, sharp as glass. "Neither did you." The words weren't accusation. They were proof. Proof that her daughter saw more than Elena wanted her to. Elena forced a sip of coffee, but it tasted like ash. "Sofia," she began, but the words faltered. How could she explain? That her mother had been in a gunfight hours ago. That danger wasn't creeping anymore. It was already at their door. The knock came before she could answer. 3 heavy raps against the wood. Elena froze, so did Sofia. Through the blinds, a glimpse of chrome. Leather, patches, Hawk and Diesel, not Cartel, not Scorpions, but their presence here at her doorstep was its own message. Sofia's voice broke the air. "They're with you." Elena turned slowly. "They're allies." Sofia laughed, bitter and disbelieving. "Allies? They're bikers, Mom. You bring that into our house." Before Elena could answer, Hawk stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room like he belonged there. Diesel followed, quiet but imposing. Hawk's gaze lingered on Sofia, then back to Elena. "You need to move," Hawk said bluntly. "Scorpions are regrouping. Cartel's backing them heavier now. They'll come here next." Sofia pushed back from the table, fear twisting her face. "What is he talking about?" Elena's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to shield her daughter from truth, but lies had already worn too thin. "There was a fight last night," she admitted. "I was there." Sofia's eyes widened, betrayal raw in her voice. "You chose them over me." "No," Elena said quickly. "I chose to stop it before it reached you." But Sofia was shaking her head, tears burning. "You don't get it. You're not saving me. You're dragging me into this with you." The silence after was unbearable. Hawk and Diesel said nothing, watching, knowing family wounds couldn't be patched with brotherhood. Finally Hawk spoke, softer now. "Kid, your mom pulled me out of fire. She didn't ask who I was, didn't ask what patch I wore. She just acted. That's who she is." Sofia glared at him, then at Elena. "And that's why I'll lose her, just like I lost Dad." The words hit like a bullet. Elena staggered inside, though her body never moved. When Sofia stormed off to her room, the door slamming like a gunshot, Hawk turned back to Elena. His voice was low but firm. "She's not wrong. This life eats families alive." Elena's jaw clenched. "Then tell me how to stop it." Diesel finally spoke, his deep voice carrying certainty. You can't. Only choice is whether you fight with us or wait for them to tear down your door. Elena stood there, torn in two, between the daughter who needed her alive and the brotherhood that had already claimed her. And in the distance, faint but undeniable, came the growl of engines. Not one, not two, dozens. The storm was coming faster than she could hold her family together. Why did the quiet feel like goodbye? The engines came first, low, steady, growing into a roar that rattled the windows of Elena's home. Sofia stood in the hallway, clutching her backpack as if it could shield her from what was coming. Hawk and Diesel had already moved to the porch, eyes sharp, hands steady. Cutter pulled up minutes later, his rifle slung low, face grim. Elena stepped outside, the night cool against her skin. Headlights cut through the dark, dozens of them, circling like predators. The Scorpions had come, and behind them the Cartel's black SUVs. The road outside her house had become a battlefield. Hawk's voice was low. They want you scared, they want you to fold. Elena scanned the lines of machines, the shadows of men with weapons. Her chest tightened, not from fear but from clarity. They're not here for me, she whispered. They're here to send a message. Diesel chambered around. Then let's answer. But Elena's gaze flicked to the window where Sofia's pale face watched through the glass. She remembered the girl's words. You're not saving me, you're dragging me into this. And she knew the choice had finally arrived. She stepped forward, out from the cover of her porch, her hands empty. Hawk hissed after her, "What are you doing?" Elena ignored him. She walked into the wash of headlights, the gravel crunching beneath her boots, until her silhouette stood alone between the house and the road. Voices rose from the bikes, mocking, threatening, daring. A figure stepped out from the Cartel SUV, his suit too clean, his confidence too sharp. He looked at her like prey. "You should have stayed out of it," he said, accent curling the words. "Now you'll bury your daughter next to you." The words sliced, but Elena didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, her voice carrying steady across the dark. "You think fear builds empires. It only makes enemies stronger. You came to take what isn't yours, but all you've done is give me something to fight for." The man laughed, shaking his head. One woman against all this. Behind her, Hawk's engine roared to life. Then Diesel's, then Cutter, a chorus of defiance. The angels circled up behind her, headlights blazing, chrome gleaming. Elena didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon. Her stillness was louder than their noise. The Cartel man's smirk faltered, because he saw it, the truth in her eyes, the truth of someone who had faced death before and walked through it, someone who had nothing left to fear. Engines growled, hands twitched on triggers, the air was a razor about to snap. And then slowly the Cartel man raised his hand. The bikes idled, the SUVs backed, not retreating in shame but recalculating. This fight wasn't theirs tonight. As the convoy rolled away, the silence left behind was heavier than any firefight. Hawk stepped up beside her, his voice low. "You stared them down." Elena's eyes stayed on the horizon where taillights faded into darkness. "No, I just showed them I don't bend." From the window, Sofia's eyes met hers, wide, wet, but no longer only afraid. There was something else there now, understanding. Elena walked back to the porch slowly, her body aching with the weight of choices made. Sofia opened the door before she could knock, her voice breaking into the night. "Don't make me lose you too." Elena pulled her daughter close, holding her as if the embrace itself could shield them both. Hawk and his men waited, their silhouettes patient in the dark. The war wasn't over. It never truly ended. But in that moment, Elena understood something she hadn't in years. Sometimes the greatest act of defiance isn't firing a shot. It's refusing to bow, refusing to let fear decide who you are. And as the night settled back into silence, one truth whispered through her heart, quiet but unshakable. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.